Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Forza Italian Football Podcast. I'm your host, Conor Clancy, coming to you after another really exciting round of Serie A fixtures, joined by, as ever, Pogorzelski. Kev, hello, how are you keeping?
I'm good. Nice to see you for third time. Well, third time in 7 days, yeah.
Yeah, well, officially the third time, but to the listeners, it's probably the fifth, right? Because there
Yeah.
were two divisions there, but
There
yeah,
were probably also some before midnight and after midnight. So, again, probably we've seen each other most days this week.
we have. It's nice. And the fact that we're recording this so early on a Sunday makes it strange that it is this week and not next. But anyway, let's not get into that. We're also joined not by Vito Doria this week. We've got Euan Burns standing in his place. Euan, it's good to speak to you again. How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm exhausted now after that derby. I think everyone is after this weekend. Like Kev just said off air, there's been about 3 game of the season contenders, so I'm very much done with it all now.
Yeah, it's been a good weekend, but also a weekend that we will be happy to see the back of just because we can rest a little bit. I should just say at the beginning, we're recording this a little bit earlier than usual just because of commitments on Kev's part, really. So Kev is the reason that we're not going to talk about Napoli Cagliari, nor Venezia Torino, but we were never going to do that anyway. The weekend's results were Spezia lost 2-1 to Milan. Daniel Maldini making his first Serie A start and scoring his first Serie A goal. I was there for that one, and what an experience that was. Inter-Atalanta looked like it was going to be the game of the weekend, finished 2-2. Then Genoa Verona finished 3-3 in what looked like it was going to be the game of the weekend. Juventus beat Sampdoria 3-2 on Sunday morning. Fiorentina beat Udinese 1-0. Sassuolo beat Salernitana by that same score. Empoli Bologna had their own contender for game of the weekend and a 4-2 win for the Tuscans. And Lazio beat Roma 3-2 in, you guessed it, another cracking game. We're going to start with the Derby della Capitale because Lazio, I suppose you could say against all odds, Kev, got the job done 3-2, and they were quite impressive too.
Yeah, well, we did say in the preview midweek that they were going into this in such a bad run of form and performing so badly that they were probably going to go and nick it. But I thought it would be a single goal win or a sort of a hard fought win. And for the majority of the game, they looked much better of the two sides and certainly deserved to race into their 2 goal lead.
They did, and that preview we're talking about is, of course, not available to everybody, Kev, is it? It's only available to our lovely patrons over on patreon.com/Forza Italian Football, where the community is growing quite nicely. We've had a few new subscribers over the last week. You guys obviously like the game weeks of Serie A that are all pushed together that we don't exactly like that much. So thanks for signing up. And if you've not signed up over there, do sign up for €2, €5, or €10 a month. The €5 tier is by far the best value for money. But if you just want to help us out and help us continue going to games and keeping the site running, then €2 a month is plenty. But you did the report for us on this one, and aside from the technical drama that you suffered through, there was enough going on the pitch to keep you both sweating and entertained.
Yeah, it was properly good game. You always fear with these sorts of games that you look forward to it for like 2 weeks and then you always fear it's not going to be as good as you hope, but that really was. Like I've said, Lazio did deserve to win. They were by far the better team. Despite being a great game, it was one of them, it still felt like it underwhelmed slightly in the sense that it was poised for Roma to genuinely make a really good comeback or at least get to 3-3 and then Lazio go and score again on the counter because they were just so dangerous like that. But in the end, it just sort of fizzled out. Everyone got very noticeably tired about the hour mark. But yeah, Lazio on the counter were almost irresistible. I've not seen a team be as good as that on the counter so far this season.
Well, Lazio raced into that early lead, as you said. They were 2-0 up within 20 minutes. Sergei Milinkovic-Savic getting the first in a bizarre header. Rui Patricio, if you've not seen it, go and look at it. And there's a great photo from behind the goal of when Savic gets the header ahead of him. Patricio's standing out of his goal further away than Savic and facing his own goal. It looks really bizarre, but obviously the story of the day looked like it was going to be Pedro scoring, obviously having joined Lazio from Roma on a free transfer over the summer. But it wasn't to be just because so much else happened. But you and we were exchanging messages throughout the first half of this, and you seemed pretty down on the game as a whole at halftime. You kind of thought it was going to be written off just before Roma got that first goal.
Yeah, Lazio were just that good that, particularly for the first 20, 25 minutes, Roma just never, they didn't show anything. It just looked like Lazio could score at will. But they did, so after about half an hour, they finally got to grips with things. Lazio sat back slightly. And then it did feel like it was a matter of time until Roma were going to score. And in the end, they did just before half-time. And it was one of them classic situations where, they didn't want half-time. It was really, really badly put for them. But they did pick it up again as soon as they came straight back out. But then with how good Lazio are on the counter, they just one ball from Luis Alberto through to Immobile, who was brilliant all night. Held it up, Felipe Anderson, then that was pretty much it. Roma didn't have the legs to score 2 more goals, let alone 3.
Can we talk about Immobile? Because, again, I feel the need to jump to his defence. Not that he needs it, but I need it to get it off my chest, because he took a lot of slack during the summer. But what a player he is. He didn't score today, but Euan gave him the Player of the Match award on Forza Italian Football. And Kev, he was impressive, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I kept thinking, can he be Player of the Week without scoring? And I know he gets a lot of sort of grumbling voices playing for the Italian national side. But when you look at what he does for the team, particularly with the first goal that he assisted, Pedro's. Euan talked about how Lazio were counter-attacking, but I think people ignore the fact that he's so dangerous that when he makes that run, 3 Roma players go with him because they're more concerned about where he's going. That it leaves Pedro sort of free to run through. And although with the third goal, the pass kind of arguably made it a little bit easier for Immobile to get a run on the defender, they were again everybody rushing over to Giro before just sort of Felipe Anderson being left free for him to roll the ball across to him. And I think particularly with the national side, they just don't want to see that he's making those runs and doing those things, because I suppose if he doesn't assist, then they don't see the direct benefits of it. But he does it time after time after time. He just occupies so many of the opposition defence that is another benefit of having him on the pitch.
No, it's exactly right. He does just take players with him wherever he goes. But that third goal, what he did for that, you saw him go through and you thought, okay, Immobile is getting his goal and he very much deserves this goal. And then he stopped and you thought, what's he doing? It's too close for him to be going towards the corner, whatever he's going to do here. But then when he just laid it off, it was remarkable. Such a selfless goal, and something that, if that doesn't work out, the old cliched comments will be, oh, you're a striker, you've got to be greedy, you've got to shoot. But the selflessness there was brilliant. Absolutely incredible from Immobile, but not a great surprise, really. Kev, we'll talk about Pepe Reina, because I know he's one of your life's loves, and he made a big, big stop to deny. I can't remember who it was now, actually, to be perfectly honest with you. It was Zaniolo, wasn't it? He made a big stop on Zaniolo after having been awarded the Serie A goalkeeper of the year for last season, despite probably not having been in the top 10 goalkeepers in Serie A last season. But he deserved this. He had his moment, and now that reward seems completely justified.
I didn't realise he got awarded that. Maybe it was a fan.
I don't know who it was by, but he got it.
Yeah. No, loads of time for Pepe Reina. I certainly couldn't get down as quickly as he got to that Zaniolo shot, even at his age, let alone mine now. But yeah, I spoke about it briefly on one of the previous pods about the error that Strakosha made in the Europa League. And I think it took a long time for Reina to kind of become number one. I think everybody thought he was going there for, if you like, inverted commas, the sort of easy ride of being the backup goalkeeper, but he still does have so much to offer at his age. And maybe even more so under Sarri, where his distribution is so good. But if he can still pull off saves like that, and we'll get onto it later, we're looking at a goalkeeper of a similar age in Handanovic and the mistakes he's making. then yeah, he's probably got another year or so, even maybe as number one at Lazio.
How much of a boost, Ewan, do you think this is for Maurizio Sarri's Lazio? Because they started like a house on fire, then stumbled a couple of times, but now this. You saw the celebrations after the game. This is something that can really propel the entire rest of their season. At least for the next couple of weeks, you would expect to see them have the capability to build some momentum on this. Now, next up, they've got a trip to Bologna, and then they play Inter, so they're going to need to be at their best. But after tonight, you'd back them to be.
Yeah, they can certainly take huge confidence from that performance because they were certainly deserved winners. But it's often after this sort of result, it's the next game that really, really matters because a lot of teams can show up on a day in a massive game, get it right, the other team doesn't, and a derby win will always be the most blown up win you're ever going to have. Basically, it's going to make everything seem completely okay, and it's not. They were still quite leaky at the back, but I think it's the next game that really matters because if it's all very well going and beating Roma, and the fans will take huge joy from that, and it's a great thing to Sarri to do and have. But if they go and draw 1-1 in their next game against a lesser side, then it's like, well, was there actually any progress made? Did we actually learn anything from that game or not?
On the other side of things, Kev, there's Mourinho and Roma. I'm sure you were delighted to see Mourinho unhappy with a derby loss, but how much of a setback do you think this is for them? Because they're kind of the opposite to Lazio in them, that they've only just started to stumble now. They obviously had the upset last week against Hellas Verona. They got back to winning ways in midweek, but now they've lost again.
Yeah, I think as Ewan says, the derbies are a very sort of it's a game just on its own. It can be played in isolation. It can kind of be viewed in isolation, and maybe considering the performances in the last couple of games, even though they managed to scrape a win in their fixture before the derby, the performance might have given Mourinho something to kind of take away from it and think that that there's enough there. They're showing enough fight for him, and just it's a one-off.
Part two, we'll talk about one of the other games of the weekend in Serie A. We'll be right back. Okay, Saturday evening's game. Inter 2, Atalanta 2. Inter went 1-0 up relatively early on at the Miazza. Lautaro Martinez scoring what I would say was another contender for this fictional goal of the month competition that we're never going to run. But then Ruslan Malinovsky did what he does and scored a belter before Rafael Toloi completed the comeback for Atalanta. Edin Dzeko levelled in the second half, and then all hell broke loose, basically, Kev. There was a penalty that Inter missed. Roberto Piccoli thought he had won it in the 87th minute for Atalanta, only for VAR to intervene after all of the celebrations had happened with the bench and the fans and the whole lot, and it was ruled out. It finished 2-2, but it's fair to say that it felt like it had finished 7-7 with the way it went.
Yeah, it was constant end-to-end drama. I don't even know where to start, really. There were so many things that kind of I could dwell on. There was like Handanovic performance where he sort of palmed the second Malinowski effort, if you like, into Toloi to put Atalanta 2-1 up. There was his mistake trying to hook the ball out that allowed them to take the lead but not take the lead because of the VAR review. And then there's DeMarco's penalty where he scored a free kick against Sampdoria the other week, and it was hit with his instep. And I thought to myself, how has he got the power in his instep, and accuracy to do that? And he kind of did exactly the same thing with his penalty, but there was so much power. The ball seemed to take an age to sort of come back down into the box after it hit the bar. It was like everybody was there, sort of eyes to the heavens, waiting for the ball to drop down. But brilliant game of football.
There's another great photo from whoever was on Reuters duty over the weekend where Musso's celebrating the penalty save, just like staring behind his goal. But Jim Shitty's also in shot looking up. And I think it might be Toloy in the background who's also looking up there like, okay, just wait to see where this comes down. But Musso's giving it everything. It was a great shot. But yeah, absolutely madness. But you look at this situation that Inter have with Handanovic. And we mentioned Juan Musso there, who's gone to Atalanta and is already continuing to show that he's one of, if not the best goalkeeper in Serie A, having done so with Udinese previously. He moved this summer for not an awful lot of money in the grand scheme of things. Marco Silvestri also moved from Verona to replace Musso. But Inter are left with Handanovic, and their only alternatives are Alex Cordaz, who I think is about 38, 39, and Jonas Radu, who was on loan at Parma a couple of seasons ago and couldn't get a game there because of Luigi Seppe before Luigi Seppe actually improved as well. Why have Inter not addressed this problem?
It's a really weird one, isn't it? Because it looks obvious. You think they should have changed it a long time ago, and they do seem to finally be doing so. There was murmurs out of the club afterwards that the decision was taken that this will be Handanovic's last year as number one, and that they're going to go all out for Andre Onana from Ajax, who obviously has been serving that ban, and everyone's kind of forgotten that he is around. But he is, and he's very good. And I'm quite excited about the prospect of that because from my memory of him at Ajax, he's a bit like Mike Maignan in the sense that he's a bit weird. Like, he's very good, but he makes some really weird saves and some very unorthodox ones and just doesn't do, he'll come out and head the ball every now and then, stuff like that. But yeah, the options there aren't good enough really to probably warrant dropping him.
No, they can't drop him. But that's the problem. They've got themselves into this position where they've got a goalkeeper who's way past his prime, Kevin. They can't drop him. But I saw, again, friend of the pod and site, Patrick Hendrick, commentator for Serie A, said that it looked as though Gasperini had just told his players to shoot on sight. Which, if that's happening in a professional football match, and not just down the park, because you see that the guy who's not usually a goalkeeper is playing in goal for the team you're against, that's damning of how far he has fallen.
It's proper Sunday league level, isn't it? When you go, come on lads, the goalkeeper doesn't want it. Just shoot from anywhere. It doesn't really matter. They have taken a long time really to kind of. They could have even done I was going to call it a job share. I suppose it is a job share. Not that I'm one for rotating goalkeepers, but almost you could have brought somebody in much younger and kind of given them cup games or games here and there, and then kept Handanovic on. But time is now maybe to cut their losses at the end of the season, and you never know. Juventus might be ditching Wojciech Szczesny, so they'll go and pick him up, and then have a different problem on their hands.
That would be fun, wouldn't it? If Szczesny just did a little tour of Italy from Roma to Juve and then to Inter. It's just like he's just trying to annoy everybody, basically, and doing quite a good job of it at that as well, you'd imagine. But on to Atalanta, because, again, they started the season slowly. They're starting to find their feet a little bit earlier than I had expected. I do suspect that there's another dip in form to come just because of the way they tend to start under Gasperini. But they really showed a lot here, Kevin. They can feel quite hard done by to lose or to leave with just a point against Inter away at the champions. And that, again, speaks volumes to how good this side is.
Yeah, I saw Inzaghi after the game saying that Inter did enough to they deserved to win, and I thought, well, what game were you watching? Because I thought if anybody shaded it was Atalanta, and if you consider that they were away from home, they took the game to Inter. They were progressive in their passing, they were determined and on the front foot when they tried to drive forward with the ball. And even if they have a little dip now, if they win a next couple. Because of the way they're picking up now of their play, I think they'll be okay as we kind of turn around to the second half of the season. But I don't know. I just doubt maybe they'll be champions as some of us predicted at the start of the season now.
I think Vito was the one that predicted Atalanta to win the Scudetto, actually. I don't know if you're trying to throw that at me, but I believe
I
it was
thought I
Mr.
joined
Ori.
you in predicting it myself, so I think you lulled me into a false sense of security.
Kev, we did do that, but don't tell people again. Vito's not here. We can just say it was him. Don't worry about it. It wasn't us.
No, he's too prominent on social media. He'll fight his corner after he's listened to it.
It's true. You know he's typing a tweet as he's listening to us say this right now. We'll wake up.
I'll have trolls coming at me constantly.
It'll be the first thing he hears when he wakes up on Monday morning Australian time. So by the time we all wake up, he'll have his tweet up. Anyway, hello Vito. We'll speak to you next week, and you can defend yourself on the pod. Euan, is there anyone in Serie A with a better left foot than Ruslan Malinovsky?
No, it's a simple answer, I think. But there's contenders. There's Paulo Dybala's got a decent shout, but as I'm sure we'll come on to, he is injured again.
Yep.
But to be honest, I'm struggling beyond that, actually. I suppose DiMarco has got, we've not seen too much of it yet, but there's evidence to suggest that he's got a bit of a mad left foot as well. But yeah, beyond that, I think the with the whole shoot on sight thing, the amount of shots that Malinovsky just pinged off at will was incredible. Which normally when a player does that, it's deeply annoying because they very rarely go in. But for him, it was genuinely worth it every single time.
Kev, you've got a contender for Serie A's best left foot?
Oh no, I just said it's definitely not Bernardeschi, but the way he plays, or when he's even on the pitch, he doesn't seem to use it that much because he's sort of anonymous as a footballer at the moment.
Why are you having a go at European champion Federico Bernardeschi?
Oh, just because. Oddly enough, he's
talking about Inter.
It's one of those where for Italy, he actually did something. I was quite surprised that they got some output out of him. But it just feels like he's been there too long now. And this summer he should have really took that European Championship win as a catalyst to say to Juve, look, I need to play more. I want to be successful in my own right, not just kind of sit here as a bench warmer. But he would, if we maybe saw it a little bit more often, be a contender for one of the better left foots in Serie A.
He'd be great with Atalanta as well, wouldn't he? He'd just have a lovely time. Gasperini would make
Ilicic replacement.
I was thinking more of on the
Malinovsky replacement when Juve signed him and then sit him on the bench.
Nah, he'd operate in that wing back role, wouldn't he? He'd be Gosens' stand-in, and he'd do a fine job, better than Giuseppe Pezzella. Anyway, I'd be willing to wager. But anyway, go.
Yeah, well, you say about the wing back as a replacement for Gosens. So I think Bernardeschi's at the front of my mind because I watched Samp versus Juve today, and he played on the left wing, and he just seemed a little bit put out that Chiesa was on the right, and actually some of the graphics that came up before the game had Chiesa on the left, so he would be cutting in, and Bernardeschi on the right, so he would be cutting in. But Bernardeschi largely occupied the left-hand side and just looked disinterested. We've even wanted to do that kind of what we'd probably class as traditional wing play, but so I wouldn't have him down to be playing as Gosens' replacement or backup in Atalanta if you want him to.
Right, look, we're not going to spend too much time talking about Juve, but Kev, you've kind of forced it into the conversation, so we might as well just do it now and get it over with. They beat Sampdoria 3-2, and it's their second straight 3-2 win, which could be an encouraging thing, but it just doesn't feel like it is with them.
It could if the performance was better. It's the second consecutive 3-2 win that they've just edged. They started really well. Paulo Dybala, there'll be something going up on the site in probably a couple of days.
Monday morning.
How much in the morning there you go about how much influence he probably is expected to have and probably wants to have in the wake of Ronaldo leaving. And he started perfectly. He hit a really sort of instinctive low drive to put them 1-0 up, but then 10 minutes later he was off with a muscle injury and tears, and you wonder, after all the absences that he had last year, whether this is another issue that's going to keep him out. But when he departed, there was really nothing from Juve other than what you would expect. Cuadrado and Chiesa going up the right, Morata trying to run the channels and maybe trying to outmuscle his marker. And they only got a second goal because of Bonucci. The one plus from the Juventus performance was Locatelli, who he didn't only sort of screen the back four, but he also was quite progressive in his passing, more than Bentancur. I think they can ditch him now and just look for somebody to play alongside Locatelli. And it was a wonderful move that actually brought their goal because he kind of scooped the ball over the defender for Chiesa. Chiesa took too long and wasted the chance. And then Locatelli ended up placing the ball into an empty net. But they then go and concede 2 goals, and they just look so poor defensively at the moment. And even though we like some of these games when you get your Inter-Atalanta 2-2, Juve look so unadventurous or unexciting going forward. You think if they're going to keep conceding goals like this, there'll be games where they won't be able to outscore the opposition.
There is a difference between 2 top teams going at it and getting 4 goals between them, like we saw in Inter-Atalanta, and 2 teams who just aren't very good at the moment, producing a lot of goals. There's a very different type of game, and it can be enjoyable to watch in like a slapstick kind of way almost. But yeah, no, I completely take the point. Look, we'll talk about Juventus more on the preview pod for patrons and also next week, because they are playing Torino in the Derby della Capitale next Saturday, I think it is. So if you want to hear us look ahead to that, patreon.com/Forza Italian Football. For all of your extra Italian football content needs, it's Champions League week, so there will be a Champions League review as well, and the Serie A preview. So there's plenty going on. But now we're going to go into part 3, I believe it is. I've lost the run of myself, and talk about another Maldini at Milan. So AC Milan went away to Spezia, and I followed them. Not my first time in Spezia, but my first time at a game in Spezia, and I got to say, I love the Stadio Alberto Pico. It's a bit of a nightmare logistically when you get there, because Kev, let me tell you, right? You'll enjoy this. I got into the stadium, and it was only when I got into the stadium that I found the entrance that I was directed in was on the other side of the pitch from the press box. And obviously, in some stadiums, that's more of a problem than in others, because, as is the case in, I'd say, every single Italian ground, you cannot go from one side to the other. You can't go into the curva because there's fences and gates and all sorts. So I saw a photographer go out onto the pitch, and the steward didn't pay much attention to him. So I just followed him, and I just waved my security or my press pass, and he didn't look at it. So I just walked across, and I was walking behind the goal, and it was a lovely time. I was beneath the curva behind the goal. The music was very loud, and I just thought I definitely shouldn't be here. And then I got over to the other side, and I had to get past the tunnel. But I arrived at the tunnel as the Milan goalkeepers were coming out, so I had to wait for them to go by. And let me tell you, the Milan goalkeepers are massive. Like, they are massive men, and you don't realize it until you're that close to them. But eventually, I was let go past the tunnel after a bit of a confusing exchange with the steward, who was curious as to why I was where I was. But I just said, I'm here now, haven't I? So I just need to go there. And then I got up into the press box, and I didn't have a desk, but I had a seat, which was nice. And yeah, it was a lovely time. But the real story is that Daniel Maldini, 19 years old, and yes, you've probably guessed it by now, he is related to Paolo and Cesare. He's the 3rd generation of Maldini at Milan. He started in Serie A for the first time. He scored the opening goal, and Milan won 2-1. Kev, this story, I mean, you're probably old enough to remember Cesare playing for Milan as well, and the beginning and end of Paolo's career. So for you, this must mean even more than it does to the rest of us.
You nearly got a swear word out of me then. But I certainly saw Paolo score the first against Liverpool in Istanbul in 2005. Oddly, made me laugh when you were mentioning that was when I was at Anfield for Milan Liverpool a couple of weeks ago. chap next to me said, "Who's that just come on for Milan?" I said, "Oh, it's Maldini," and he turned to me and went, "He can't still be playing, surely." And I was like, "No, he did retire a good sort of decade ago, but never mind. You're clearly not you're not a keenest follower of Serie A as I am." So I kind of explained that he was one of the sons that were attached to Milan at some stage, and yeah, it's. I think today the sad thing for me about this is that it's nice when these sort of things pop up and kind of you don't know about them. So I was kind of unaware that Chiesa was at Fiorentina and he was obviously the son of Enrico, and then he scores, and it's then you can go and actually it feels like the Maldini sons that have been in and around Milan. It's kind of people have been waiting for this whole this milestone for their career and that milestone, and I think then I don't actually know how good he may well be, or how close he's actually to sticking around, or becoming a fixture in the first team, because it has got this famous name attached to it, and it must be a nightmare for him as a trying to make his way in the game.
I bet he wishes he had any other name at the moment, because he's not his dad in any way, shape, or form. Completely different position. He's like an attacking midfielder. And you could just see how much of a big deal it was from even before kickoff. So during the warm up, and I did tweet this, so apologies if you follow me on Twitter, but every single Milan player made the point of talking him through the warm up. And bear in mind, it's not his debut. He's played, 10, 11 times for the club before. But because everyone knew he was starting, everyone knew that every single eye was going to be on him. And Pioli even stopped the warm-up at one point just to speak to him individually. Then Theo gave him a little cuddle after it. And players were talking to him and not talking to anyone else every time there was a break to just get a bit of water in during the warm-up. Someone would always go over to him and chat. And I just thought, that kid must be, with every reassuring word, he must just be growing increasingly aware of how big this day is. And then for the first 30 minutes, he stunk the place out. He was awful. And I felt so bad for him, because you could see with every bad touch, you knew his next touch was going to be worse. And there was a back heel that he attempted, which had a senior professional done it, I reckon the coach might have tried to drag them then and there. And Paolo was sitting about probably 10 yards to my right, and he kept a really good poker face every time his young lad did anything wrong or good. But when he did that back heel, and it still found its way to, I think it was Salamakers, but only because Salamakers had to change his run and stop it from going out of play, he made a mess of the back heel. I looked at Paolo, and you could see him just, he wasn't happy to see his son do that on his full Serie A debut, let me tell you. So you can be sure that he had some words for him when he got home. But after the first 30 minutes, he settled. And to his credit, even when it wasn't going his way, he was always making moves, looking for the ball, dragging players around the place. And when he had the ball, he was direct. He was aggressive in it. And he was always trying to play passes, whether it was to Teo, Rebic, or Kalulu. He was always looking to find a way forward, and there's definitely signs of encouragement there. He lost his head a little bit in the second half. I don't know after the goal if he got a bit excited, but he made a silly foul when he didn't need to, and then he was taken off, I think, about maybe, 10 minutes after he scored? Not too long after anyway, so a way to keep him in check, perhaps. But it was a lovely moment when he scored, because Maldini, as I said, was right beside us, and he was keeping his emotions in check, like he was smiling and stuff. But then the Curva started singing Daniel Maldina's name, and you could just see Paolo was moved, very, very moved by it. But Euan, I think the thing now for Milan, their fans, and the Italian football media as a whole, and we can already forget about this happening with the English-speaking Italian football media, because they've already lost their minds about him. But they need to just relax and not compare this guy to a superstar, because that will just ruin him.
Yeah, it happens a lot with He's not broken out as such, because, like Kev said, he's been around the setup for quite a while. Everyone's been waiting for this to happen. But purely because of the name, a lot of people who don't know that are really running away with the story and being like, as if he's suddenly no one realised he was there, and now suddenly he's come on and scored, and he's going to be the best forward that Italy's ever seen. And that's not how it's going to be. And if he does make a genuine success with his Milan career, and he might not, and if he doesn't, that's fine. That's not a bad thing. But if he genuinely does, then it's going to take time. Players don't always, it happens every now and then. We've seen it. It happened in England with Rashford is always the example I use because he really did just appear and actually did sustain it. But loads of players have appeared over the years. It happens all the time. But only 5% of them actually sustain it and manage to make a genuinely successful career. So if he does, that'll be fantastic. But I think a lot of people are going to potentially turn around in 3 or 4 years' time and go, oh, do you remember when Daniel Maldini scored that goal? Where's he now?
Yeah.
And he might be at Empoli or something like that. And that'd be fine. That's still a career. He's still made a career in football, in possibly top flight football, depending on whatever Empoli are doing at that time.
It does feel like Milan have kept him around for a couple of years that they maybe shouldn't, if that makes sense. That they've almost wanted to have this narrative at some point, whereas he might be a little bit further down the road, even at Milan. If say 2 seasons ago they'd let him have a full season on loan at a Serie A club, but his name's almost meant that he's had to have this sort of constant attachment until he comes through and scores this goal. And maybe he really sort of falls flat for the rest of this season, and that does allow them now to say, oh, we've had three rows of Maldini scoring and things, and actually let him go and get the experience that he needs elsewhere. Because it does feel like he's not got enough minutes to warrant him at that age sort of sticking around the Milan first team.
I think you're right on the money there. I do think there was definitely something along those lines going on at club level, not club level, if not in Pioli's mind, because I'm sure Pioli doesn't really care about that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I do think that the best thing for him would be to get a loan move to someone like Spezia, right? That level of Serie A club where he can play a little bit more and play with players that, they're going to help him learn things, and they will probably care a little bit less that he's a Maldini than some of the Milan players do, just because they kind of have to. And I think it'll be good for him. But yeah, let's everybody just stay calm about Daniel Maldini, please. Definitely a lot of promise there, but let's not kill him. I mean, look at Mattia Destro and the countless other Italian forwards who have come to absolutely nothing compared to what they were tipped to when they first broke through in the club. But we will talk a little bit more about Destro later. I want to talk about Rafael Leao, though, because he came off the bench at halftime. I can't remember who the second change was who came off the bench at halftime. It was Leao and Pellegrini. Both Rebic and Giroud went off at the break, and Pellegrini did very little other than throw himself around on the ground and annoy everybody. But Leao was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And had Maldini not scored, Leao was getting my man of the match. But there was this shot that he took where he had the ball on the left, and it was a bit of a boga move. He had the ball on the left and got to the corner of the box and just shot before anyone was expecting the shot. But the arc of the effort, it seemed to go up over the Ligurian hills before it came back down and curled out of nowhere. And the goalkeeper had no idea where it was going. Because the Pico is so small and so tight, you could make out all of the players' facial expressions at all times. And after this one hit the post, it came back to Leao, and then it came to nothing. But Leao just turned around and he was smiling because he knew, I'm having a game here. And that was very early on. And he knew that he had the defenders. And from then on, every time he got the ball, Spezia panicked. And they didn't know how to live with him. And he was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So Leao in that kind of form coming off the bench is lethal. But there is a side to football that can't be explained with numbers and with visual things. But there's a feeling around this Milan team. I could hear the celebrations in the dressing room after that game, and you could see it on the pitch, how much they seem to really believe in one another as a group and as individuals. And Euan, having come close last season, you get the feeling that this might be the time that Milan end that long wait for a Scudetto, because they seem like they are good enough this term.
Yeah, I think they definitely do appear good enough because I don't feel surprised at all when they win. Not which sounds daft because generally speaking they've always won more than they've lost, but it just these sorts of games now it just feels like they will win that. That's just the way it is. The only games that are worth looking at are the ones against the big teams. They feel like predictable winners now, which is a massive milestone for Milan to reach. But I think what sort of spooks me away from thinking they're the real deal, and I imagine it's the same for actual Milan fans as well, is that they seemed like the real deal last season for quite a long time, and that will really scare a lot of fans. I imagine there'll be a lot of Milan fans thinking, I'm not even thinking about that title until we get to at least April, because they just looked so comfortable before Christmas, and you thought you just can't see how they're going to throw this away. And that's the way football goes. It's such a long season. Somebody could come along and just be better than them. But right now, it looks like that team would be Napoli potentially, because they are still ahead of them. They're essentially still chasing.
Yes, I do need to encourage calm with Napoli as well, because between the 21st of November and the 6th of January, they basically play everyone. And until then, they don't play anyone. So I think Napoli will be quite comfortably involved in the title talk until Christmas. But then by the time November comes around, but by Christmas, it'll probably have changed quite considerably. Anyway, that'll do. Part 4, I think. We'll talk about all of the other games in Serie A. Right, so we're back. We were going to start part 4 with Juventus, but Kev, you brought them to the table a little bit earlier than planned, so that means we don't have to talk about them now. So what we can talk about instead is Genoa 3, Verona 3, and this is the third consecutive mad game that Verona have been involved in since Di Francesco went. There was the 3-2, a 2-2, and now a 3-3. And again, they went 2-0 up here, and then they were losing 3-2. But then Kalinic scored again, and they drew 3-3. But there's only one thing in this game that I really want to talk about. And that is Mattia Destro's second goal in the 85th minute, because it's a great goal. You watch it and you think, wow, that's very good. He got the ball, he beat a player, he chipped the goalkeeper, and then as he was running to celebrate, he seemed to throw something into the stands. But when you see that happen and you think, well, what is he throwing it? Why does he have something to throw into the stands? I didn't see him pick something up. If you watch the replay of that goal, for the whole thing, he's carrying a bottle of water, Kev. And I don't know why he's carrying a bottle of water, or how he's managed to score a goal like that while carrying a bottle of water.
Yeah, first thing to say that the goal's a wonderful solo effort. I suppose he did score about 2 or 3 minutes earlier, so maybe in the post equaliser celebration, somebody'd handed him a bottle of water to kind of replenish himself.
He's not going to have been carrying it for 5 minutes, though, is he?
That's far too long, surely.
If you think from when he scores, hey, I reckon he probably had it from 2 or 3 minutes tops, really, from when the game kicked off again, and probably just kept hold of it.
Quite possibly. Have you ever seen this before? A player scoring with
Well, I would have quite liked the referee to rule it out for VAR, because it's one of the fast cool things that VAR probably would have done these days. A bit like the penalty that Verona got awarded, actually, for having his little toe trod on. But yeah, no, that would have made that. Well, it wouldn't have surprised me. It certainly would have made headlines if the goal had been ruled out because he was carrying a water bottle. I've got a vague recollection of Ray Houghton being booked against Italy in the 1994 World Cup because he was carrying a bag of water. Because although the heat in the US meant that the players were getting dehydrated ridiculously quickly, FIFA was still adamant that players, couldn't take on water while the game was playing. And for some reason, the Americans had decided to give water bags out. So I'll try and dig one out, but there must be a picture of Ray Houghton carrying this bag of water at the 94 World Cup.
Fair enough. When you said bag of water, I had no idea what you were talking about, to be honest. But you see that here in the summer months, particularly during the pandemic football last year. Um, but players were just getting thrown little things where they're clearly just full of sugar or something, and they'd knock them back and then just leave them on the pitch. But yeah, it was an odd one. I have to say, when he scored, he didn't drink the water. He just threw it into the Gradinata. I don't know if it's Nord or Sud. Sorry, any Genoa fans listening. And I thought, oh, that's a bad idea. That's the worst place to throw it. Everyone's jumping around celebrating, and you've thrown a bottle of water with the lid on into the big group of fans. Someone definitely got that in their head, which wasn't great. But anyway, what can you do?
And it's certainly a bookable offence, I reckon.
Absolutely right. It is. In the other games, I was at Sassuolo Salernitana. Sassuolo won 1-0 this afternoon rather. It was a Domenico Berardi goal that sealed it, but Jeremy Boga was excellent to set it up, and he had been quite good in the first half as well as Sassuolo grew into the game. But Salernitana, now I'm not sure if there's a reason for this, I just don't know, but they didn't start with Simi or Bonazzoli, and both changed things quite dramatically when they came on. Bonazzoli in particular nearly scored a lovely backheeled effort. He beat Consigli, and I think it was Rogerio or Mulder. No, it was Rogerio got back and cleared it off the line. But big win for Sassuolo. They're still not quite their Roberto De Zerbi selves. They look a little bit more, I suppose, awkward is the word. They're not as fluid in attack as they used to be, and there's a lot more pointing from Maxime Lopez telling people where they're supposed to be, whereas last season it was just everybody knew where they were supposed to be. So I do think that under Alessio Dionisi, they will be okay, and they'll probably be comfortably top half, but it just might take a few more weeks for them to get to that point. Good to see them win. A shame for Salernitana that they are still waiting for their first win of the season, and the longer they go without getting it, the squeakier their bums are going to get, you'd imagine. In Udine, Ewan, if you're there, Fiorentina beat Udinese 1-0, and there's no surprise about the goal scorer here. It was a Dusan Vlahovic penalty in the first half.
Yeah, I'm getting quite excited for. I know a lot of Liverpool fans who are keeping a bit of an eye on Vlahovic because they're convinced that they're going to sign him, and I'm waiting for them to start whacking about terms like penalty merchant and stuff, because that does seem to be all he's scoring this season. But I'm sure the actual fun goals will come back. But I think the refreshing thing about Fiorentina this season is that's the exact sort of game that you'd expect them to somehow cock up and give away 4 penalties and lose, despite being the better team for most of the game. Whereas now they actually are just winning those sorts of games. They're picking up the points they're supposed to pick up, and still putting in good performances against bigger teams as well. You know, they were relatively unlucky against Inter that they didn't get something out of that game. They just ran out of steam, didn't take the chances when they had them. But it's clear they've got a blueprint that can beat good teams, and they seem to be calmly dispatching of teams that were around them last year, and hopefully for them this time they won't be around them.
Kev, Empoli beat Bologna 4-2 in just another one of those, what we could call average Serie A matches now at this point. Bonifazi scored an own goal within a minute, and Musobaro scored for Bologna. So did Arnautovic. Bologna hit the woodwork. I think you were keeping count. I wasn't. I was at the map A for this. But then Empoli kind of just took care of business quite nicely. A 4-2 win over Bologna, and pressure's probably on Mihailovic now.
Yeah, it could so easily have gone the other way because, Barrow struck the bar early on with a wonderful effort. The game did kind of swing either way, and then there were, I think, from Empoli going 3-2 up, there Arnautovic hit the crossbar either side of him actually scoring. And again, we're still waiting for Arnautovic to blow up a little bit in Bologna. You thought if anything it's going to be him sort of hitting a post a few times and then going and kicking an advertising board or something, getting himself sent off. And then, in the 90th minute, they score a goal to kind of put a game out of reach of Bologna, but it could have been 3-3 before then. It could have been anybody's game. And because it kind of went to and fro for the entire 90 minutes, as opposed to Verona versus Genoa, which kind of escalated in the second period, was kind of how I sort of mentioned it as one of my games of the season so far, certainly.
I think you're going to have to create a few new spreadsheets, Kev, because last week you were talking about the goals of the season so far, and now you're on about the games of the season so far. So go on to
I mark them down. They're down with an asterisk, so I can refer to them in 7 months' time.
When we compiled the big spreadsheet with all of the recommendations for the...
Absolutely. At my age, I haven't got the memory for it anymore, so I have to make lists as and when I'm thinking about it, man.
What I do for so just to let people behind the curtain, there's a big spreadsheet at the end of the season where we go and fill in our nominations for game of the season, goal of the season, signing of the season, everything of the season. When it comes to games and goals, what I do is I'll think back to the games I was at, and if I can remember a goal from that game or the game itself as being good enough, I'll mark it down, and then I'll just wait a few days and see what everyone else says, and then I'll say, oh yeah, I remember this one, I don't remember this one, and if I remember them, I'll put them in as my nominations as well. And then it goes to the readers of the website to decide on the winner anyway. So anyway, there you go. I think that's all of the games, isn't it? It is all of the games. Napoli are currently just about to go in 1-0 up over Cagliari at half-time. Victor Osimhen obviously got the goal there. And then Venezia host Torino on Monday evening. But we won't be speaking about that, obviously, because this pod will long be out by then. Remember, lovely listeners, head to patreon.com/Forza Italian Football. And you will be able to listen to the podcast's release a little earlier than you will if you get it anywhere else, because I basically edit it and post it straight on there, and then it takes quite a while longer to go up on Spotify, Acasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever you listen to your podcasts on. Patreon is first, and it will be available publicly on Patreon too, the regular pod. But there's so much more other content available for just €5 a month. We're doing 3 things a week exclusively to Patreon. The Serie A newsletter is going out on every Tuesday. Then we have Champions League review pods on European weeks and Serie A preview pods every single week when there's no Champions League action or Serie A midweek action or international action. Don't worry, because we'll have bonus podcasts there as well. We've got a few things lined up. There's one really exciting interview that we've got lined up, and I'm looking forward to that getting done. So let's hope it comes through, and the first non-Serie A or Champions League midweek we'll have that for you. So hopefully next week, but we'll see how things go. But yeah, there are €2 tiers, €5 tiers, and €10 tiers. The €2 tier is basically just to support the website, keep us going to games, keep the website running. €5 tier, you get all of that extra content, and then for the €10 tier you also get all of that extra content, and then some extra merch as well, which you'll also get some merch on the €5 tier. So head over to patreon.com/Forza Italian Football and check it out. Anyway, that'll do us for this week. Kev, thank you very much. I understand you've got an early flight.
Pleasure. Early flight to Porto, so thank you for the early recording.
You're very welcome. Sorry, listeners, if we didn't talk about Napoli, but it's Kev's fault, okay? So blame the Champions League for that and the appeal of Portugal. But Kev, enjoy your trip. Euan, thank you for coming on and then leaving and then coming back on in the pod tonight. It's been good to have you on the pod proper.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not doing anything else this evening, so I've been battered by technology. So I'm going to go to bed and pretend that none of it exists.
Excellent. Good idea. All right, listeners, we'll speak to you again next week for those of you who aren't on Patreon, but we'll speak to the rest of you, or the patrons, on Wednesday night and Friday morning. Goodbye.